I'm Chimo Mangazi with Business Time on Times. It is a magazine program where we bring you business and economic news stories making headlines. In the program today, the Malawi Confederation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry describes 2021 as a challenging year for the business sector. Also in the program, we engaged Director General of the National Planning Commission on implementation of the Malawi 2063 in 2021. We have these and other stories. Stay tuned. Hello and welcome. The Malawi Confederation of Chambers of Commerce and Industry, MCCCI, has described 2021 as a challenging year for the business sector. They cite rising inflation, high electricity costs, and lack of access to finance among major challenges that affected the sector. Justin Kweu has the whole story.
MCCCI holds that the industry sector was faced with challenges such as high cost and inefficiency of telecommunication services, difficulties in access to finance, high cost of electricity, rising inflation, and a weak kwacha on top of the COVID pandemic. The report adds that local manufacturers were also faced with challenges due to difficulties in obtaining intermediate goods and other inputs caused by shortages of foreign currency in the country, as well as supply chain disruptions associated with COVID restrictions. The chamber has since said the new year may also turn out to be difficult for business depending on the pathway of the COVID pandemic and weather patterns. It believes that the pandemic-induced supply-demand mismatches triggered inflation upwards, and if these persist for much longer in 2022, it could force the Reserve Bank of Malawi to implement contractionary monetary policy to counter inflation.
It still looks a difficult year, but the ultimate outcome is dependent on two things. The COVID pathway, whether it's going to go down or it's going to go up, and the rains. These two have a great bearing in the future. Because they undermine some of the positives that were experienced last year. Like we all noticed an improvement in electricity, that there were less blackouts, and there was a good agricultural harvest. Of course, the other challenge was, yes, there was a good agricultural harvest, but we lacked a trusted aggregator. We still had vendors who did not care for the producer, the original producer. And the trusted aggregator, as a matter of agency, needs to be empowered. Right now, the one aggregator that we can look at who can be trusted is ADMAC. They must be empowered in a timely manner. Now, that whilst there were those positives, those are now going to be undermined depending on the pathway of COVID as well as the rain situation.
Recently, President Lazarus Chakwera launched a 2-year socio-economic recovery plan which aims at stabilizing economic fundamentals and setting a foundation for medium and long-term economic recovery. In his speech, Chakwera admitted that the economy is bleeding, but expressed hope that with the recovery plan, the economy will gain ground and create a conducive environment for the private sector and citizens. Economist from the Malawi University of Business and Applied Sciences, MUBAS, Bechani Chereni, also adds in his views on outlook in 2022 up to 2023.
Our economy is agrarian. If like right now, if somebody is going to tell me that the 2021 or rather the 2022-2023 outlook might be gloomy, I might begin to be believing that. Why? Because we are a rain-fed agricultural economy. So we are seeing what is happening with the rains. The rains are not behaving as we would have loved them to do. If you move around, you see that indeed some people have actually uprooted their plants. they are replanting. That means that the growing season is actually not nice at all. With that then, maybe the 2022-2023 growth might be a problem if we are not going to bring in the mining thing which the president talked about, if we're not going to bring in the manufacturing aspect which the president has also been discussing. So if we are going to bring the mining and the manufacturing, we can even grow by over 10%. That's a possibility. However, the 2021-2022 financial year, we are expecting at least 3% growth rate, because in terms of agriculture, we performed better. And remember that agriculture alone to GDP, it contributes over 25%. In fact, it contributes about 28%. That's quite a big number. The others are, in fact, actually finance, insurance, which manufacturing contributes less than 10%. So if you're going to look at that, you can actually note that, for example, the wholesale industry, the retail industry, they contribute a lot towards our GDP. So when you bring in all those things, you might actually begin to see that maybe MCCI did not see that perfectly for the 2021-2022 financial year. But for the 22-23 financial year, our agriculture industry does seem to be in problem.
Malawi is an importing and consuming agro-based economy which is easily affected by fluctuations on the international market.
Meanwhile, one of the players in the sector, Muli Brothers Limited, has called for government intervention to improve the situation. Feston Malekezo reports.
MPL Holdings Limited Regional Manager for the Northern Region, Patrick Nankonya, made the remarks after holding prayers on Tuesday for a better year. Nankonya says the challenges that companies face trickle down to employees.
In 2022, we are expecting a lot from the government, because without the government assisting the business sector, we cannot move forward. The country will not develop. The country will develop if the government will support us. So we are expecting a lot from this government to support us in terms of giving us contracts, in terms of stop sidelining us, and they have to change their business mindset. They have to consider us. We are one of the business people in the country. We are part of the development of this country, so they have to include us in their mindset. They have to consider us.
The company, which has a range of businesses such as transport, agribusiness, tea planting and processing, has over 500 employees in the northern region. Recently, President Lazarus Chakwera announced an economy recovery plan to help the country's struggling economy recover from the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Chakwera said the plan, to run for 3 years, would help restructure the economy by stimulating sectors such as mining, infrastructure development and manufacturing.
This is Business Time on Times. We'll be right back after the break. Performance of the local unit, the Kwacha, has been somewhat predictable in that each passing year it would slightly gain or maintain ground against other currencies during the agriculture marketing season that lasts between April and July. However, in 2021, the Kwacha plummeted mercilessly against other currencies on almost each month of the year. Why was this the case? Justin Mfweu attempts the question in this report.
The depreciation of the Kwacha in 2021 speaks volumes of how vulnerable the local economy has been. This notwithstanding, continued inflation has left the business community and Malawians in general exploited and robbed of their purchasing power. The academia and economic experts have maintained that such trends are triggered by the country's huge appetite for imports against a narrow export base. For example, Malawi imports toothpicks, second-hand clothes, China-made clothes, pumpkins, bananas, among other items that could be easily produced locally on top of essential goods such as petrol and diesel, fertilizer and machinery for production of products. In turn, the country exports raw tobacco, raw cotton, raw tea, sugar, soya, and most recently, maize flour, which earns a few dollars, not even close to the imports. For example, on January 4, 2021, the kwacha was trading against the United States dollar at 778 kwacha 8 tambala, but closed the year trading at 824 kwacha 4 tambala per dollar, according to figures from the Reserve Bank of Malawi. This represents a 5% drop in value against the dollar for the kwacha in 2021. According to Financial Market Dealers Association FIMDA President Maclawen Sikwese, the main reason the import cover has been below the recommended 3 months is the rebasing of the monthly requirement from $209 million to $250 million. He added that the continued decline of the country's foreign exchange reserves will continue to impair the central bank's capacity to support the market with foreign exchange liquidity critical for a stable kwacha. The Malawi University of Business and Applied Sciences-based economist Bechani Chereni believes countries such as Malawi stand to be hit hardest with the unavailability of foreign exchange because of overdependence on imports. Chereni added that in the next 3 months, if donors would not come in to help the country, then foreign exchange availability will continue to be a problem because the country is entering the lean period. Financial market analyst Cosmas Chigwe concurs with Chereni, saying the best way to deal with the problem is turn around the country's export trends rather than depending on raw agricultural products. He added that the country needs to add value to the export products which fetch cheaper prices. Minister of Finance Felix Mulusu said in an interview, the scarcity of foreign exchange is indeed a factor and the government is making moves to improve Malawi's export base.
Well, obviously, availability of forex is a factor of exports. Yes, if we do not export enough of what we produce, our forex earnings are not going to be enough. So we really have to work to export more, and this is why we're coming up with these strategies. The president last week launched the national export strategy so that we are able to generate enough forex for us actually to develop, and we are looking at various sectors that will enable us to generate forex. For example, we have got an MOU and an order from South Sudan, where right now we are exporting maize flour, we're exporting maize, we're exporting rice and other produce that we make. That is going to obviously help us to boost our foreign reserves.
On December 16, President Lazarus Chakwera launched the Malawi National Export Strategy NES2, which is touted to be a pathway towards doubling exports. Malawi remains a consuming and importing nation, highly dependent on exporting raw agricultural products such as unprocessed tobacco.
In 2021, the country launched the National Development Plan dubbed Malawi 2063. Comments are being made, however, that the beginning was full of rhetoric than action. I engaged Director General of the National Planning Commission, Thomas Muntari, on the same.
You recall, Chimwemwe, that we started off by, as a country, launching the Malawi 2063 in January of last year. And then we had to follow it through with a 10-year implementation plan. And so it only got launched in November of last year. But what was key was that when you look at the Malawi 2063, the popularization that happened around it and making sure that the various stakeholders, including the ministries, departments and agencies, the cooperating partners, political leaders and parliament, all rallied around making sure that everybody gets to appreciate that now the country has got a new vision. And I think one of getting that off was to ensure that there is continuity of that vision beyond political regimes. And you will have seen that the previous sitting of parliament even approved to have the Political Parties Act to be amended so that political party manifestos need to talk to the vision. And I think that was part of beginning to operationalize it. So when we as a nation launched the phase 10-year implementation plan in November, it's going to be in earnest going to be implemented through the 2022-23 national budget, where the Minister of Finance has been up and around to consult various stakeholders on what else. But I think what will be key is that the Ministry of Finance will be picking a lot on the phase 10-year implementation plan priorities, because they've been given timelines in there. So we are very hopeful that 2022 was indeed a planning year, but now moving forward into the 2022-2023 and forward, we should now be looking at implementation. How do we get those plans, the vision, as well as the first 10-year implementation plan to begin to be implemented through the national budgets? And by extension, we will be in this year fully engaged with the cooperating partners in ensuring that their country assistance strategies, including those that the NGOs are working on, are really talking to the priorities of the MIP1 and by extension, the socio-economic recovery plan, because it's a pull-out of some of the quick win recovery strategies that are being taken out of the MIP1 to help the country recover faster. So essentially, I think we had a very fruitful planning year in 2021, and now it's time for implementation oversight.
A planning year, you call it, but there are views that we have taken the old trajectory where it's all rhetoric and no action on the ground is being taken. What do you say on such sentiments?
I wouldn't want to agree fully to that point. I think you and I will see that we are living in an environment where usually when you're looking at taking off, you also make certain assumptions. And I think we all thought that by now the COVID environment would have been dissipating. We still have seen that there are some different waves that are still coming on stream. Efforts are being made to make sure that as much of our population is vaccinated, because if we do not get the population to be able to move around, then our recovery rate will be very slow. So the vaccinations, as you've seen, the authorities are now taking them to the community levels, door to door. The whole point being that the more we are safe as a nation, the more we are opening up to goods and services and people to be able to continue business at the close levels. And at the same time, and that's what will now trigger a lot through the socio-economic recovery plan, is for us to continue emphasizing a lot on digitalization, as well as the issues to do with the infrastructure development, front-loading of infrastructure investments. Now, these normally would have to happen through national budgets, as I mentioned. And we are very hopeful that in the next national budget, there will be quite a lot of recovery strategies that would have to be defined because the other plans that we are talking about were more long-term, laying foundations and giving hints on what needs to be going into the national budgets. So I think at the end of the day as well, it's also a rallying call to all of us because we cannot just leave it to government. While they will have to be giving a leadership in terms of where we need to go, all of us need to, including non-state actors, private sector, academia, and all these NGOs and others, to really look at how do we reposition ourselves in focusing on those strategies that will help us move faster. That includes, as I said, digitalization, front-loading infrastructure investments, social safety net programs that are more productive in nature, and all that. So it is very key that we work closely together as a nation and our cooperating partners in ensuring that whatever we want to recover on happens much faster than would have been the case.
Well, with that story, we've come to the end of today's edition of Business Time here on Times. It is a magazine program where we bring you major business and economic news stories making headlines in the country. On behalf of the entire production team, I'm Chimomo Mangazi. But always remember, if it doesn't make money, it doesn't make sense. Bye for now.